maybe to start with, any do you have a particular memory of when you first met Syd as a schoolboy, as a friend?
You know, I was just thinking about that in the studio before I came down here, and I think the first time I met Syd was at a Saturday morning art class that we both attended at Homerton College in Hills Road, Cambridge, when I suppose I was, I don't know, 9 or 10 and he was 8 or 9. Yeah, we used to go and, you know, make pottery crocodiles and paint a bit and whatever.
Really young, actually.
Yeah. Well, I lived in a road called Rock Road in Cambridge, and he lived in Hills Road, he lived about 6 doors away from my aunt. 6 doors? Yeah, something like that. No, less than that. 183 and 187. So yeah, we knew each other. I'm trying to think where he went to primary school. I don't think I went to Mourning Memorial Primary School, and I don't remember him there. But you know, maybe he was there, and I just didn't notice because he was 2 years below me at school.
Right.
And 2 years at, you know, 8 is a lot.
Absolutely.
Gets less and less, you know.
Yeah.
The difference between, you know, 8 and 6 is a lot more, as we know, than 58 and 56.
Was there a sense when you were quite close friends as kids, or was that later?
Later. Yeah, definitely later. Yeah. We became close, you know, when we were teenagers. And when we were all sort of pretending to be interested in Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Allen Ginsberg and talking about smoking dope but not doing it, you know, those days in the early 60s. And that was all sort of mixed in with, I mean, I remember when Syd went out and bought a Futurama 3, you know, red sort of plastic guitar, whereas before that people had been fiddling around with acoustic guitars, and music was about C and D, and you know, it was much more Woody Guthrie than the Shadows. But then, you know, Walk Don't Run and Apache and those things, suddenly kids started to... Syd, I remember particularly, you know, would learn to play Apache. And I couldn't play anything at that time, so it was all strange, unknown territory for me.
So he was a Hank Marvin fan?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. He was.
Were you...
You know, you had the whammy bar. The Futurama 3 was the cheap version of the Fender, but it had a whammy bar on it. So you go down.
Which Syd continued to do later with Pink Floyd, actually, isn't it? That sort of...
Yeah, well, yeah, he didn't... Yeah, I don't think he really pursued the whammy bar in the way that some people did, you know, but he still played... He went back to playing Fenders, you know, he had the Fender Telecaster, I think was the last guitar that he had when he playing with us. That white Telecaster he had covered in Melanex circles. Yeah.
So when you just pushing on to going to London and architectural college,
Mm-hmm.
I gather that your first band was more of a kind of jazz, and Nick and Rick were in that, is that right?
No, it wasn't jazz by any stretch of that imagination. I mean, to go back to Syd and Cambridge for a minute, he played in a band called Jeff Mott and the Mottos. I don't know if you've spoken to any of those guys.
Certainly.
Jeff Mott went on to be in a band called the Something Blues, I think, and I think actually made a couple of records professionally. And I was involved with that band to the extent that by that time I had my aspirations to studying architecture had already been imposed on me from above, and so I was beginning to draw and stuff. So I started doing posters. I remember doing drawing posters for that band. But that was my kind of the sum of my involvement really in music in Cambridge. And it wasn't until I went up to Regent Street Poly to study architecture that I started to play instruments. I bought a Spanish guitar and I wrote "I Believe to My Soul" on it in black letraset, I remember. Makes me cringe a little bit now, but at the time I thought that was super cool.
Who did you admire then, musically?
Well, in Cambridge I'd spent... I had several great friends at school in Cambridge, and used to spend most nights with these guys. A friend of mine called Willa and another friend called Seamus, and we used to go round to Seamus's house. His mother was a strange kind of bohemian lady who'd married an Australian artist called Michael O'Connell in the 40s, I suppose, and they were separated. But Michael had been a textile print kind of artist, and lived next door to Henry Moore in Much Haddam, and they were separated. But she was a wonderful woman, and she used to stay up all night cooking boiled potatoes and sausages for these 15, 16-year-olds, as we were then. And we'd go around there and smoke cigarettes and listen. And I mean, we used to take amphetamines a bit, I remember. And we were listening to jazz and blues almost exclusively, A lot of Bessie Smith, Billie Holiday, Huddie Ledbetter, stuff like that. But also then a very kind of quick phase of Kid Ory, Johnny Dodds, early Dixieland jazz. And then very quickly we latched onto Art Blakey, Thelonious Monk, Charlie Mingus, or and other kind of slightly tougher Sonny Rollins, John Coltrane stuff, but jazz and blues mixed together. And so that's really where my roots and interest in it all lay. Except insofar as music provided a potential stepping stone to sex. You saw those guys on those Aldermaston marches with their guitars singing Woody Guthrie songs and things, with kind of long-haired pretty girls swooning around them, and I thought, wow, that looks like my game. I'm not sure quite what Syd's motivations were. I think I can remember sitting around and playing acoustic guitars with him in Cambridge before I left even. And I remember one day going up to a concert in London, probably a blues concert. I remember going to the Fairfield Hall. Well, I'm not sure if Syd was with me or not. He may have been, to see Sonny Boy Williamson, Sonny Terry Brownie McGee, Lightning Hopkins, and Howling Wolf, and Hammy Nixon, all playing on one evening at Fairfield Hall, which was amazing. Anyway, I remember sitting with a piece of paper with Syd, drawing out what the lineup was going to be and what amps we were going to have. 2 AC30s we decided was it. Put the vocals and lead guitar through one AC30, and the bass and the rhythm guitar and the keyboards through the other one. So there was very much a plan, always. But
so that was before you left Cambridge. You said
yeah.
You were sitting around doing that.
Yeah, and I don't know why, but we always had this notion that when we hit London, I knew it was clear he was going to come up to London as well, because London was the Mecca, and that was where one had to be, and that we would start a band together. And as it happened, by the time he arrived, I was already playing with a few other people, so he kind of joined in.
And they included Nick and Rick.
Nick and Rick, yeah. In fact, Nick and Rick were the sort of permanent ones. There were a bunch of other people who were all at the Regent Street Poly. One guy who was a tutor there, called Mike Leonard, and various other people, who were most of them were there. A few others came in because they had PAs or owned instruments, which was always a good thing if you wanted to be a band. If you had a PA, you were in.
At what point did it become Pink Floyd? And at what point did you sort of move from that sort of blues, jazzy tradition into something which seemed to be going somewhere else, a bit different? Well, I think when Bob Close failed his first year exams, which he did, and his parents
put their foot down and said, you know, I think Bob's parents were Polish or something like that. His father was a wonderful man. He worked in the university in Cambridge as, I think, as a curator in one of the labs, or he was a lab technician, I think, in one of the things. But his hobby was making guitars. He made these beautiful guitars. I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, he put his foot down and said, no, Bob, no more music, you must study now. And so he did. But he was a great player. He could actually play. He could play anything. But the great love at the time was Elmore James, and you know, and so he could play all those guitar parts. He learned them off the records, and he could do all of that. And so when he stopped, in a way, we had to do something else because we could no longer make a convincing stab at that stuff. But we used to do so many of those things. I'm a crawling king snake, I remember, with great fondness. But we used to play a lot of pop as well, or the kind of bluesy end of pop, Rufus Thomas, all those songs, you know, Walking the Dog, and a lot of Bo Diddley we played, and quite a wide, and Wilson Pickett, and you know, so we've had quite a wide repertoire of other people's stuff. But almost no pop. We didn't try and copy any pop songs.
So it was more of a driving, blues-based, sort of rhythm, rock and roll kind of blues.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Mike Leonard was your landlord, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Sort of Leonard's Lodgers, I believe.
Yeah.
Was that the point where it got quite heady, that things seemed to be coming together, that some, I don't know, you were beginning to create your own sort of music, Syd maybe writing some songs himself?
I can't remember when the association with Mike started, but I remember it started really because he wanted some improvised music around the experiments he was doing with light. He had projectors and things, and he would, you know, wrap up tubes of shiny Melinex and shine light through it and crinkle it and see what happened when it hit the wall, and he'd make interference patterns by having two discs moving one against the other and so on and so forth. And we would, you know, play music to it. So I think all that had started happening before Syd actually came up, because the rest of us already shared that flat in Stanhope Gardens in Highgate. What was the question again? I have a very short span.
I know, the question's too complicated. There's a sense of, on the one hand, you've got the traditional, the blues and so on, that you were kind of imitating a bit.
And then we went a bit more pop, you know, and we went a bit more, I think, into... well, we started playing Louis Louis, I remember. Whether that was Syd's influence or not, I don't know, but probably, you know. And then, of course, Syd started to write one or two songs.
Which was sort of forming...
Candy in a Currant Bun and, you know, those things. I listened to the first demo of those, which, you know, recently. Suddenly somebody gave me a cassette of those early I'm a King Bee we did, and Candy in a Currant Bun and something else in that first session.
Was Arnold Lane in that?
No, this is way before then. And strangely enough, I think the very first song I ever wrote, which was called Walk With Me Sydney. So you can see that I was kind of very involved anyway in terms of with Syd and all of that. That has a lead vocal, I think, by Rick Wright's ex-wife, Juliet. Because we used to go singing on the tube, you know, for Rag Week and things like that, just to earn a few pennies for whatever charity it was.
What would you say, I mean, Walk With Me Sydney, what would you say was your kind of sense of him at the time? Do you think he was an unusual guy in terms of your group?
Well, he was always very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, Syd. He had an enormous capacity for life, you know, and I thought his painting was great. He was painting quite a lot at the time. And he, was a very bubbly kind of character, full of life and enthusiasm, but also I think he was quite innovative, and I mean you could say his attachment to Kenneth Graham and Hilaire Belloc and all of those kind of influences was quite radical for them, because you didn't expect that kind of literary middle class stuff to surface in rock and roll. And in the same way that later on his interest in Eastern mysticism and in general, and the I Ching in particular, which produced a song like Chapter 24, to start playing around with those kind of ideas was quite radical. He was also he kind of soaked up musical ideas really from other people. He was a great copycat, Syd, in terms of music. He would listen to American, the more avant-garde end of the American popular music at the time. So he would be listening to early Doors, or I'm trying to think of the other bands, and I can't, and I won't be able to, because I just can't remember that.
It was all such a long time ago as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was a star, very attractive man.
That so the sort of innocent, well, the childishness, innocent, sort of naivety in those first songs, which is, it's kind of stunning because it's so simple and so direct. And he's like almost like nothing else in a way. It's like I know some people say it's influential, but in a way no one's really been able to imitate it, because it seems so unique in a way.
Yeah.
At the time, it probably didn't feel like there was particularly anything special there.
Well, no, I think it did. I think a lot of it. I mean, maybe a lot of the associations they were always odd, and they became more bizarre, as time went by. But if you take some of the songs off the first album, it's interesting that I had a couple of songs on the first album as well. It's interesting that even my preoccupations were beginning to appear in that. There's a song called Corporal Clegg on the first album, which is sort of, there's my sort of life's work right there in that one little kind of beginning. But with Syd, Bike, I think, is an extraordinary. Well, there were lots of great songs on that first album in that particular style that he developed. But it was the way, part of what was good was the way that he allowed the lyric and the rhythm to attach to one another in a way that was both poetic and musical. I've got a bike, you can ride it if you like. It's got a basket, a bell that rings and things to make it look good. I'd give it to you if I could, but I borrowed it. There's something about the way the lyric attaches to the meter in a very satisfying way, but then but I borrowed it kind of kicks it off into. There's something very English about that, about the completeness of that, and yet the fact that it's so unpredictable. I think it was the unpredictability of it combined with its simplicity that made it so special.
It's almost like it's like a conversation about a bike. There's nothing kind of staged or sort of crafted about it in one sense. It seems so just absolutely.
It's very painterly.
Natural.
It's very painterly. It's like, I remember a painting he did and gave to a great friend of ours called Adrian Taylor, who was a lawyer. No, they bought it. They bought it off him, and it was a picture of Christians and lions, or just lions in the Colosseum. And he got an arched template mask and laid it across the thing and or sprayed it or drew around it and then did it another way like that. So you got this strange perspective. So it's a device. You know, he was good at spotting how to use devices in a kind of meaningful way, I think. And I think the construction of the songs was in some way kind of painterly, if I can use that adjective, if it exists.
Yeah. No, I think it's,
And if it means anything.
it's a good one, actually. Yeah. It's you can almost sort of the strokes. I mean, it's not geometric or
No.
not like a mathematician
Take a couple if you wish, they're on the dish. You know, that kind of alliteration as well, which is very childish, but is also I'm not sure why it moves us. There must be a reason, you know. Why those songs were as good as they are.
And then, in a way, I'm still unclear as to whether some of the solo album material was actually written at that time or later. But some of it's very moving because he's again what seems to be very simple, and sometimes like Baby Lemonade starts out. Seems like a very cheerful, upbeat song, but then it's got this terrible sort of sadness about it.
I don't remember Baby Lemonade.
Okay.
You know, for me, that period in a way was the kind of, you know, the gem in all of that was Dark Globe, which I still find myself sitting, you know, I can be driving along in the car and I'll certainly sing it, and which seemed to me to be, you know, a direct continuation of the songs that he wrote when he was still in the band, but he was already schizophrenic and consequently was feeling this awful alienation from everything and everybody. And he wrote, you know, it's awfully considerate of you to think of me here, and it's awfully something making it clear that I'm not here and I never knew the moon. Jug Band Blues, on Jug Band Blues. And he also wrote Vegetable Man then as well, which I think is going to be released on, or maybe it has been released, I don't know, on some compilation. But
Dark Globe is...
They, you know, oh, where are you now, Pussy Willow, who smiled on this leaf? You know, it was like so weird and crazy, but yet it is, I get chills just talking about it without even singing it or anything. And of course so did a lot of other people. You know, as a story, I went to see REM when they were a very new band, because I'd heard something and I liked it. And I went to the Hammersmith Odeon to check them out. And I'd rung up Harvey or somebody and said, I want passes, you know, and I'd got passes. And I went, and I thought, well, I'll go and say hello. And I went backstage. And they were very kind of welcoming and rather kind of reverential and sort of, and we said hello, except for Michael Stipe, who sat in the corner, you know, kind of refusing to speak and ignoring me and whatever, which was fine. It was his gig or their gig. I didn't mind at all, but I sat and watched the show, which was great. I really enjoyed it. And then at the end they went off, and then he came back on and he sang Dark Globe a cappella on his own. And I thought that was great, you know. Well, I don't know if he was having a go at me or not, but I thought it was fantastic that he got some of the words wrong, but by and large it was great. I thought, how cool.
But a little bit strange that after he'd sort of ignored you, that he...
Well, he may be one of the Pink Floyd were nothing after Syd kind of camp, you know, of which there are a number. Or it may be that he just wanted to show me that he knew that bit of the work as well, you know. But it was great. He sang it really well, of course, because he's got a great voice, and it was very moving.
Just going back to Saucer Full of Secrets, because that really is the album that I guess Syd's reputation as a songwriter kind of rests on. Really, it's a very short period of time, and quite a few songs there.
Saucerful.
Am I right?
Well, I don't think he's got very much on Source of the
Sorry.
Secrets, has he?
I got that.
Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saucerful is the Jug Band Blues. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Piper is the one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's almost as though he kind of grew up very quickly as a songwriter from the. I mean, if you think, I was thinking of Arnold Lane is like very, and that isn't on there, but I know it's that period.
Mm.
It's like a very a new kind of pop song in a way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, through Astronomy Domino, which is tremendously inventive in terms of the musical side, the musicality of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then just pure songwriting with Bike. You know, it's a great spectrum in one album, and yet so quick, so fast. You know, such a concentrated short period of
Well,
time.
I'm not sure that it is, you see, because like all first albums of any artist or any band represent a number of years of making notes or jotting things down or writing songs or whatever. So, I mean, I don't have a very clear memory of the chronology of that period of Syd's writing, but because it was the first album, my suspicion is that those songs were probably written between, you know, over a period of 2 or 3 years rather than over a period of 6 months. That would be my guess.
At what point did it all start to go wrong for you and for Syd? I mean, obviously there was drug taking, but that must have been going on generally. At what point did it start to seem like?
Well, it may have been going on generally. I wasn't doing any drugs at all, apart from alcohol.
Right.
Syd was, I think, quite a lot. But I think Syd's illness. It probably, you know, we can say that marijuana, to a certain extent, and acid to a large extent, can do nothing but exacerbate that collection of symptoms that we put together and loosely describe as schizophrenia. You know, and so there is no doubt but that those things are very bad for schizophrenics. They worsen the condition and so on and so forth. And there is no doubt that Syd was schizophrenic and that he was taking those drugs at the same time. And we all became very worried and concerned about that, and you know, and tried to get him to shrinks. And
did you?
You know, mainly, of course, to what's his name? The famous drunk
Hardy Lang.
Yeah, probably not a great choice, as it turned out in the end. But we never actually managed to get him through the front door. We, you know, got him to the door a couple of times, but never got him through the door. And I alerted his family as well. And his elder brother Alan, I think, was a doctor, and he came up to see. He actually came up to London and seen him, and went back and said, "No, he's fine. I've seen him. There's nothing wrong with him." Well, we all knew there was something seriously amiss, you know, and we actually, as I'm sure you must know, we did a tour in '68 of the States. I mean, just of the West Coast. I think we only did 3 gigs or something. You know, where it was quite clear that he'd gone. He was, you know, he was no longer with us in any real sense. You know, which is where, you know, in the movie where the cigarette burns down between the fingers. Well, I went into the room and saw that. He'd been sitting in a room in the hotel in LA with this, you know, bits of burned cigarette paper on his fingers like that, and the rest of the cigarette lying on the floor, and he sat there and it had burned down through his fingers without him noticing. So he was in a very sorry state.
That was in The Wall. The movie, when you said the movie.
Yeah, in The Wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
was there a point when you personally? Okay, so just.
Do you want to change reels?
Was there a point when you personally sort of took a look at Syd and thought, Christ, you know, this is serious?
He was no longer able to function in a rock and roll band because he wasn't making enough contact with the reality of the situation. And some of it was some of it was hilariously funny. Some of the things he did, were hilariously funny. Like on the tour I was telling you about, we did the Pat Boone show, and Pat Boone came on and said hello, and what Syd would do is through every run through or rehearsal, we were miming to see him and he'd play or something, I think, like that. And through the run-throughs, he'd be miming away. And then they'd go, okay, we'll take it, because we were taping it. And then when they went, action, he'd stand there like that. Cut. Okay, we're doing it now, guys. Ready? And Syd would go, yeah. And he'd do it again and again until finally we had to say, listen, he's a bit weird, I'll mime it. And I think those tapes exist still, he did all kinds of things like that. And in fact, towards the end, and it was at that point that I was suggesting to Peter and Andrew that I said, look, we can't go on like this, right? He's got to become Brian Wilson, because the thought of losing the flow of songs was disastrous for us at that point, because he was doing most of the writing. So he said, why doesn't he just write songs and come and record and we'll go and do gigs? But there's no way we can do that anymore. And I think at that point Syd had some idea that the band the way forward was to employ 2 girl saxophonists and some weird kind of idea. And then for a while, after Dave joined the band, we all kind of worked together, and Syd would come. We were trying to get songs out of him. And I'll never forget one day he came to a rehearsal place, room that we were in, and he said, with a new song. Oh, great, how does it go? And I remember sitting down with him with a guitar, and he was strumming away. And this song went, have you got the chorus? He said, I'll teach you the chorus. Okay, it goes like this. Have you got it yet? Cha, cha. Have you got it yet? Ch, ch. Have you got it yet? Ch, ch. And I went, okay, yeah, okay, I think and I say it goes like this, right? And we start playing together, and he'd do it slightly different, and then he'd do it slightly different. And after he kept changing it, and he changed, about the 6th time we'd done it, he was going on, I went, I've got it. And I just put the guitar down, and that was it. That was the last time I ever did anything with him. It was strange,
It's almost like he was sending you up in a way.
Absolutely, completely, yeah. That's exactly what it was, yeah. And it was a very clever joke, I was desperately trying to learn to sing, and it kept changing. Have you got it yet? Yep, got it. So
I mean, his sister was saying that he's got this. He always had that love of the Goon show and that sort of Goon show humour.
That's Rosemary.
Yeah. So I mean,
how is she? I haven't seen her.
Oh, she's fine. Yeah, she seems very, very well actually.
40 years. Good.
Yeah. I would say maybe that's still in there. That was still in there. That sort of.
I'm sure. Yeah.
The absurd Goon showish.
Yeah. Well, the Goon show was kind of central to everybody's life in those days. The Goon show became, it went Dick Barton at Special Agent, 6:30 on Tuesdays and Fridays or whatever it was, until they banned it because kids started killing themselves, by locking themselves in fridges and things, playing Dick Barton. And then Journey into Space on Wednesday nights. Whittaker. Orders must be obeyed at all times without question. And then the Goon show, sort of, that was the required listening, really. Those were the bits, and of course, Radio Luxembourg at night on a crystal set or a thing. That was the kind of required listening for my generation. Radio Luxembourg, particularly, that was where we got it all from. That was the only access that we had to American pop music was Radio Luxembourg. Kynsham, Keynsham.
Absolutely, yes. But the audience that are younger than us won't know what the hell we're talking about. Keynsham.
No, Horace Batchelor. He had a system for winning the football pools, which paid for it all, I suppose.
j- how difficult was it though? You finally brought Dave Gilmour in, and Syd finally left. How difficult was it to kind of change and adjust, and realise that songs were coming from you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose, if Corporal Clegg described one side of my oeuvre, the other side was Echoes, which was 2 albums. I think the second album after Saucerful of Secrets. There was a bit of stuff on Saucerful of Secrets, but, I kind of, in a way, I discovered it in Echoes when I wrote Two Strangers Passing in the Street, or something, by chance two passing glances meet, and that thing about us all really being the same person, which became kind of central theme of mine, and upon which, using my own history and my feelings, I kind of have gone on elaborating on that basic theme since. I discovered something that I could write about, which was a reality that, a kind of social and political and philosophical reality of my life, which had actually very little to do with any other kind of literary or poetic influence. Whereas Syd seemed to be expressing himself almost in a more isolated way, and making literary connections, and a lot of his inspiration seemed to come from the work of others.
Your writing seemed to, on the one hand, correct me if I'm wrong, but seemed to be like 2 really powerful themes. One is the theme of loss and grief over loss of your father very early on.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other one, it seems to be married to that, is a kind of loss of Syd and grief about that.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder how. I mean, I'm full of admiration for that you managed to turn it into, art, and into something that's everyone can listen to and get something from, because there's a lot of feeling there, which sometimes feelings just go all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Syd appears obviously on Wish You Were Here a lot, and also in The Wall a lot. So he was my friendship with him and his illness combined, provide an enormous opportunity for grief. It's sad. It's very sad. I'm still very sad about it, and I occasionally read things where people have made contact with him, and I occasionally ask the question, round the side, I've heard from Rosemary, for instance, that he doesn't like contact with people from that part of his past. It upsets him, so I stay away from him. And and in a way, I think in a way that's all I can do, because it would not be cool to upset him, but it would upset me as well. Here's somebody who'd been a friend with, you've had laughs with, and you've spent your youth with, and you've had all that history with, and to not be, and it's like, hello. It's just, it would be very uncomfortable for me as well to meet him again, or to see him again.
What kind of got you writing Wish You Were Here? I mean, what kind of got you actually sitting down and constructing this?
What, the song Wish You Were Here?
Well, a whole album.
Oh, well, the whole album was a kind of nightmare to put together, because Dave and I were already absolutely at loggerheads by then, and he had one whole idea about it, of what it was going to be like, and I had a whole other idea. I'm happy to say my idea won in the end, and so there was some other stuff that got onto animals later, like raving and drooling and things. I don't know. It seemed to me when we were making that record, in the aftermath of the enormous success of Dark Side of the Moon, that, you know, in a way, I sort of knew that really we were over as far as the Band of Brothers notion of a pop group was concerned. We just weren't anymore, and we were never going to be that again. And so I was mourning that loss as well as the loss of Syd as a friend and as a colleague. And so I guess, you know, lyrically that's what I'm expressing in that thing. And I mean, I was on tour in the States last year and the year before, and I'm going to South America next spring, and I'm touring Europe next summer. And with my band now, I do Shine On and Wish You Were Here. And when I'm singing, you know, Shine On, Syd's right there all the time, obviously, because, you know, the song is just absolutely about him. And, you know, it's a really good song. It describes how I experienced his disintegration. And it describes as well the great desire I had then and still have now, and the passion I have to celebrate him and his talent and his humanity, and to express the love that I have for him.
The Wall, looking at the film, The Wall, there are a couple of moments where you just described one, which are so uncannily reminiscent of Syd. And there's one where Pink shaves his eyebrows. I understand that Syd shaves his eyebrows, or has done, and
He shaved everything.
Yeah.
Geldof wouldn't do that. He refused to shave his head.
But
Fuck off. I'm not fucking shaving my head for you or anybody else, Waters. Syd was the famous day when Syd came to the Wish You Were Here sessions. He was shaved, you know. I mean, I had no idea who he was for a long time, and neither did anybody else, I didn't think, for a while.
just ask you about that. Was that the last time you saw him, actually?
Yeah. No, I saw him again once in Harrods. I was in Harrods, I don't know, shopping, and I saw Syd.
Did he recognise you?
I don't think he saw me. I saw him. He had his brown paper bag. He was, buying sweets. Because I think he just lived on sweets. He used to live in
Chelsea Cloisters, was it?
No, before that he lived in the Hilton Hotel for a long time. He had sort of suite rooms and stuff where he would sit and eat. So he spent, far too much of his money doing that, and then he eventually moved from there. That's the last time I saw him.
Just going back to the wall, that were you saying in that it's almost like this, it could have happened to you. You had similar kind of experiences in life to some extent, with fathers dying young and the same kind of education. And was it almost like, for the grace of God, there go I, this sort of closeness of madness?
Well, maybe. Funnily enough, whilst making Wish You Were Here, was it? Yeah, it was sort of during the making of Wish You Were Here, or around that time, that I split up with my first wife. And I remember in the canteen downstairs here at Abbey Road, having a nervous breakdown. I think that's the only way I can describe it. But it was very, very short-lived. But it was like I was sitting at the table downstairs, having something to eat in a bad way. And suddenly everything telescoped. Everything went down the other end of a telescope. It all just went, all the everything. And I thought, fuck me, I'm going mad. This is what it must be like. You know, suddenly reality's changed completely. And I remember I got up from the table and walked out of the room and walked up the stairs and went into number 3 where we were working and sat down at the piano and started playing the piano. And over a period of about 5 minutes, I suppose, it came back. Reality came back to me. You know, my hands came back to the right size, and my whatever. Actually, the hand thing, you know, my hands felt like 2 balloons. That's from being delirious as a child. But this like everything receding. There is no pain, you are receding. It happened to me, and it came back slowly as I sat and played at the piano. But I remember thinking, good God, you know, this is a fine line I'm walking here, because something happened in my brain then that was very odd and frightened me. It frightened the life out of me. I knew a man who died a few years ago. He was my age, maybe a year older. And his name was Philip Hayward, and he was a lovely man. I used to play golf with him a lot. And every time we played golf, at some point during the round, I would feel a hand on my arm or something like that, and I'd turn around and it'd be Philip, and he'd be looking at me and he'd say, "We are lucky, you know." And he died suddenly of a heart attack a few years ago, in his mid-50s or whatever, but I've never forgotten that, you know. And when I think about Syd, I at least think that, you know, we are lucky, and we have to live every life as fully and completely as we can, in the light of the fact that it can all go at any minute just like that. Or whether it's something here that happens or you get run over by a bus, it doesn't matter. But, you know, the moment is precious. And I mean, it sounds stupid to say, it's so obvious, and yet it's so easy not to live the moments of our life, just to go through motions and, you know, to get into a kind of a routine and not actually be aware of the fact that, you know, life is good.
There's a kind of a anger in some of that music, which
well, in the Wall.
In the Wall, yeah, and in Dark Side of the Moon. I mean,
yeah.
Almost like it's well, you're angry that this happened to Syd, but you're also angry at things that happened to you in your life.
Yeah.
But it's a very powerful emotional anger in there.
Well, and in consequence, it's cathartic and therapeutic. You know, when shit happens, it's important to get angry about it and to release the anger in whatever way that you can. I think we English is, you know, hanging on in quiet desperation. It is a peculiarly English disease that we go, oh, something shitty just happened, I better try and pretend it didn't, you know, or at least, you know, not show anybody that I'm bothered, you know. So we all sit on our hands, and not all, but it's a tendency that I have had through my life, notwithstanding that stuff, to not, you know, show my true feelings on the grounds that, you know, I've since discovered that it's really on the grounds that I may be rejected. If I show my feelings, I will be rejected, because I will be unacceptable. That's been my notion, is that that I can't believe that I could still be loved if I showed how I really felt about things. So maybe that's part of the reason that a lot of it's gone into songs.
Is it one of the reasons why your albums are so successful, in that they do strike that an unusual kind of emotional chord, really?
I'm sure it is, yeah. You know, it's like after Dark Side of the Moon was successful in the early days, people would say, "Why do you think it is?" And, you know, people continue to answer that, to ask that, and I'm sure that's the reason, you know. And if you ask Rick, I'm sure he'll still tell you he has no idea, you know, because he can't allow the fact that it might be something to do with what the record's about. But I think it is. I mean, obviously, you know, Dark Side of the Moon is quite compelling musically, and it's got some terrific music on it, to which Rick contributed greatly, I have to say. But in a way, I think that the shape of the thing and also the sound of the music and what it is actually springs. The wellspring is the expression of the emotion, which is actually in the lyric. And it's funny you should say that, because there's something, and maybe I learnt this from Syd. There's something about breathe in the air, don't be afraid to care, leave but don't leave me, which is so simplistic and sort of puerile that it would be very easy to write it down on a piece of paper and then immediately crumble it up and throw it in the bin because you'll be laughed at, And maybe I learnt from Syd that it's really important that you don't throw that stuff in the bin, that you keep it, that kind of almost the childish expression of feeling is the important bit, and all the embellishment that goes on around it is secondary to that, this is how I feel now, in a few words, however laughable it may seem.
Yeah, that's a very strong Syd characteristic, isn't it, really?
Very, yeah.
I think Peter Jenner was describing how he wrote Vegetable Man, and it was literally kind of, okay, I'm feeling like this now, today.
Did he?
Yeah.
I was never aware of him writing Vegetable Man. But, when he came in with it, in Yellow Shoes, I get the blues, and my plastic, as I walk the street with my plastic feet and my blue, something makes me feel good. There's a kind of a stink about, what is it? Kind of a stink about red velvet. I can't remember the words exactly. But yeah, I can just see him doing that.
It's kind of, this is me. This is how I am today. This is how I feel.
Me. And all the lot, it's what I've got, it's what you see, it must be me, Vegetable Man. Yeah.
So you've carried that kind of spirit. I mean, I can see that's very clear in some of the lyrics. The Dark Side of the Moon. Some very simple kind of, they're kind of gut wrenching because they're so.
Well, it's in a way, it's a new English tradition from the early '60s, from the Beatles, really. When the Beatles almost single-handedly wrenched, and Syd was a huge Beatles fan, and they, it feels as if Lennon and McCartney single-handedly wrenched the power of the pen from Tin Pan Alley and brought it home to the lads, or to the real feelings, so that suddenly we were given permission, because of their enormous success, to write from our own experience, and to not no longer be subjugated to the world of the publishing company and the whatever, but just say, no, this is how I feel, boom, I paint what I see, end of story. And I think maybe before that, that had been reserved for very few writers, since, of course, the early days of the blues, when they were painting what they saw too, but then it got subverted in a way, songwriting that is, and and we had quite a few years of sort of pop, and only that, and of course that still exists now, but the singer-songwriter, I think, was sort of born from in the early '60s. I'm probably quite wrong. I'm not really know about these things. That's how it felt to me, anyway.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, it's the songs. I mean, your body of work is very much wrestling with very important kind of personal, social issues, which not a lot of songs are, actually.
Well, I'm still wrestling, and I'm in the middle of a new album which I'm working on this year. And so,
You've got to go off and do it.
The songs are still coming. I better go back to work on that happy note.